So, of course, a lot of people are talking about the new AEW World Champion Kenny Omega appearing on Impact Wrestling last night. It's been the buzz of pro wrestling. It's been the buzz of social media for the last 24 hours, really the last week, ever since the announcement was made that Kenny Omega would be coming to Impact Wrestling Tuesday night on AXS TV. And last night we witnessed it following his big victory over Jon Moxley last Wednesday on Dynamite. The new AEW World Champion and his new manager, the Executive Vice President of Impact Wrestling, Don Callis, made an appearance on this week's episode of Impact. They sat down with an interview with color commentator Josh Matthews to discuss his victory and what's in store with him as the new AEW World Champion. Now, in the interview, Josh Matthews began by asking about how long this AEW and Impact alliance was in the works for. Now, Don Callis, who did a lot of the talking for this segment, looks like this is going to be the kind of relationship they have as a manager and a wrestler going forward. Don Callis said it all began when he met Kenny Omega as a 10-year-old kid through his uncle, the Golden Sheik in Canada, who took Don Callis under his wing when he was first starting out in the business. Now, from there, Don Callis made it his mission to be in Omega's corner from that point forward. This included his championship reigns in New Japan Pro Wrestling, easy for me to say. So to briefly summarize, this idea has pretty much been in the works for the last 27 years. Now, Josh Matthews then followed that by asking Kenny Omega if he could explain why he decided to use the microphone as a weapon, as a cheap shot on Jon Moxley to gain the victory in the AEW World Championship last week, something he said he wouldn't do during his and Moxley's gentleman's agreement. Now, Kenny Omega said, quote, "When you involve family, when you lay your hands on the invisible hand, what do you expect me to do?" After, Omega then went on a tangent explaining the reason he made his way to Impact specifically last night. Now, he mentioned when he grew up he was an avid comic book collector. But one day, he just couldn't get the rarest comic books in the world, so he decided to drop that hobby. Now, he compared his former hobby to what he wants to do going forward in pro wrestling, which is collect the other world championships from other promotions around the world, possibly even Impact Wrestling. Omega stated that he loves to travel, and when he isn't tied up defending his newly won AEW Championship, he might actually eye other potential titles and its defenders in other companies. But before they concluded the interview, Don Callis and Kenny Omega announced they have a big announcement to make, and they promised they'll deliver that on AEW Dynamite tonight. So, of course, it'll be interesting to see what's said there. I think they also mentioned that potentially they could have more announcements for Impact Wrestling going forward. But also, before I get into my whole breakdown of the situation, my opinions on that segment, because I have a lot of them, it was interesting as well because I mentioned in the previous video we did about Tony Khan and his appearance, the AEW president, of course, appearing on Impact last night. He had a paid advertisement with Tony Schiavone on the show. It was actually a very interesting moment before we got to this main event segment, this main event interview with Kenny Omega and Don Callis, because what we had is the current Impact World Champion Rich Swann trying to leave the arena at Skyway Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, but he was stopped and told by security that the champion has the parking lot booked off and blocked off. And Rich Swann said that Moose needs to stop pretending he's the champion. Of course, Moose carries around the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, but he was informed by the security guard that Kenny Omega is the champion he's referring to. Josh then walks past him, Josh Matthews, to the outside when he's verified to be on the list. But the Impact World Champion was not on the list, as I mentioned, the AEW World Champion, calling himself the real World Champion, had blocked off the parking lot. This infuriated Rich Swann, who kicks and screams as he leaves. He looks very, very frustrated. Now, let's touch on that first. Before we get into the Kenny Omega segment, let's talk about the Rich Swann segment, the Rich Swann situation. We spoke about it here on the channel. We said that I think a potential match is the AEW World Champion versus the Impact World Champion. The AEW World Champion Kenny Omega versus the Impact World Champion Rich Swann. Why did I think that was going to happen? Because Don Callis basically hinted all about it on social media. He was retweeting pictures of Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel. Why is that significant? Bobby Heenan was the manager of Nick Bockwinkel in the AWA, when Nick Bockwinkel was the AWA World Champion, and he had an interpromotional match, really the first of its kind, against the then WWF Champion Bob Backlund. That was in the 1970s. When he started retweeting that, that raised alarm bells in my head to say they're going to go for an interpromotional match, World Champion versus World Champion. And now at this point, it feels like it's going to happen. It has to happen. I mean, last night on on Impact, got Dynamite on the brain. It's Wednesday. On Impact last night, it was hinted at so much. It was hinted at so much. Not just by that segment with Rich Swann, which to me just felt like we're doing Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann. Then in Kenny Omega's promo, he says he's a collector and he wants to collect all the championships and promotions. That felt more to me than just a tease. It felt like more than just a tease. So at this point, I think it has to happen. You don't tease that whole, is Rich Swann the real world champion, without going to a match somehow. Otherwise, why do the tease? Now, I know sometimes people just do teases in pro wrestling for tease sakes, to get people talking, to get the internet buzzing, to get people to tune into next week. But the fact that it was such a specific segment with Rich Swann, the fact that Kenny Omega is calling himself a collector, I think at this point it has to happen. And that to me says this isn't a one-off, right? Remember all the reports coming out over the last week? Oh, it's just a one-off. Kenny Omega won't be making any more appearances with Impact Wrestling. He pretty much said last night he wants to win the Impact World Championship, and the Impact World Champion Rich Swann then suddenly wasn't allowed outside of his own arena on his own show. That was certainly a seed planted, and it certainly isn't a one-off if that's the case and it's Kenny Omega's only appearance with Impact Wrestling. It doesn't look like that at all. To me, it says there will be more. That tease alone says to me there will be more. Now, in terms of the segment itself with Don Callis and Kenny Omega, I liked the explanation that Don Callis gave. I kind of liked the line when he started talking about, you don't think I would leave a high-paying job outside of the pro wrestling business to just go and do a podcast of Lance Storm and then just go and do color commentary for New Japan. I did that, so I was there when Kenny Omega won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Everything I've done over the last 5 years has all been part of the plan. Everything is by design. Everything is calculated. I liked that. I liked him. I really like the phrase, the invisible hand. I think that's fantastic. And he's talking about the invisible hand's always been at play. That was always the plan. Was it this huge, grand explanation that people thought? Not really. I felt that it was very cautious and they were very careful about what they did and didn't reveal as it comes to this storyline. From a storyline point of view, I felt that they kind of told everyone what we already knew. We know about the relationship with Don Callis and Kenny Omega. That's been spoken about, written about, and discussed ad nauseum. Certainly has been on the channel. So it kind of just expanded on the history that we already know between Kenny Omega and Don Callis. Kenny and Don Callis are like family. That's why the plan is to have him as Kenny Omega's manager in AEW and possibly Impact Wrestling going forward. And another thing to take out of this segment, I felt, is that Kenny Omega at this point, he's no doubt a heel at this point. There was this discussion about him in AEW of that, was he fully the cleaner? Was he transitioning into becoming the cleaner? Was he just showing heel tendencies? No doubt in my mind, not just this feud with Jon Moxley, but that hitting him in the head with a microphone was the official point last week of Kenny Omega as a heel now. He's in full cleaner mode, and if you watch him during that interview, he was very cocky and he was very much a heel. And look, it was just a bit surreal to see Kenny Omega be on Impact Wrestling TV and interviewed by the Impact Wrestling play-by-play guy, Josh Matthews. It was a surreal and super unique segment to watch. I liked the concept of the bus. I like Kenny Omega calling himself the collector. Maybe in this bus, Kenny Omega's trying to tour the country, North America and the world, and in this very bus and trying to collect all of the championships. Maybe that's the gimmick. It's like a version of the Lex Express that's actually over and might actually work. So what did we learn from this interview? Well, in the grand scheme of things, look, we didn't learn a lot. We didn't learn a ton from this interview in terms of what's the plan going forward. I think just the fact that the event itself, the moment of having the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega, one of the biggest and best wrestlers in the world, appear in the main event segment for a rival company that we didn't think was possible. That was the draw here. That was the moment. What actually happened in terms of what actually happened in the segment, I think that was almost irrelevant at that point. It was the event itself was bigger than the segment, if that makes sense. So certainly my main takeaways from the Kenny Omega and just quite frankly the whole show is that what we had previously thought, that this relationship was going to expand, it doesn't look like a one-off. There is certainly, to me, more at play here. I think there's absolutely more at play here. And I think as fans, we can probably now raise our expectations to see more. And this deal, this working relationship is definitely going to get expanded. And the Bucks, look, the Bucks were honest about it, right? The Young Bucks did the interview on the podcast last week and they said, look, we don't really know. what this relationship is. We don't really know what we're going to be doing in terms of AEW with Impact Wrestling going forward. We're just excited. We've already started sort of fantasy booking. We've already started thinking about people we could face in Impact Wrestling. We've seen talent on social media, very excited by it. We've seen fans very excited by it on social media. I'm not even sure AEW and Impact Wrestling thought it was going to get the buzz that it's getting now. And because of this, I think both companies are looking at this going, you know what? It might have initially been a one-off. It might have just been a favor for Kenny Omega to appear on Impact. But the reaction that it has got has changed things. And in pro wrestling, when something's working, you keep going with it. You don't stop. And I think maybe that's a situation right now where when it comes to this whole AEW Impact Wrestling relationship and storyline going forward, the buzz it has received has certainly opened things up. And just last night, when you just look at that show from top to bottom, everything that involved AEW and Impact Wrestling, there was just so many seeds planted there. You've got Tony Khan saying he's scouting tag teams, which of course is a reference to the Good Brothers coming to AEW to face the Young Bucks. He's buying airtime to have a rebuttal against Impact Wrestling, which sounds like a bit of a shade-throwing match with Don Callis and Tony Khan and AEW and therefore Impact Wrestling. You've got Rich Swann being blocked off and not allowed outside the building because the real world champion is in the parking lot. That's a seed definitely planted. He's then been disrespected. You've got Kenny Omega calling himself the Collector and a world traveler, and this idea of being a traveling champion and winning all the world championships of various promotions. That alone is like 3 or 4 seeds already planted that are going to blossom. That is 3 or 4 seeds that are certainly going to grow and be expanded on in the coming weeks. So to me, this very much doesn't feel like a one-off. If you watched that program last night and thought, well, that's the only time we're going to see Kenny Omega on Impact, or we're going to see Tony Khan on Impact, I think we're wrong. I think this is just the beginning. You know, we've been told for the last sort of week or so, just enjoy the ride because this is going to be a crazy one. This is going to be unique, and it certainly felt like that. And only unique in the sense that we haven't seen it before, not unique as it's only going to happen once. I think, like I said, it doesn't feel like it's a one-off. We had those reports last week. Oh, the relationship isn't going to be that intertwined. Fans should get their expectations down. Kenny Omega's just appearing on Impact as a favor to Don Callis. The Good Brothers are going to be in AEW as a return favor kind of deal. It's not going to be this huge, big working relationship. Well, that report does not look accurate right now, because watching that show last night, I felt, you know what, this is just the beginning of the story here. This feels like chapter 1. Last week was the prologue, whatever you want to call it, and this just feels like chapter 1. So, and chapter 2 will come tonight on Dynamite on TNT. So that to me, it just doesn't feel like a one-off. It really doesn't. And the fallout of the AEW World Championship. Look at it from this perspective. The fallout of the AEW World Championship last week in one of the biggest episodes of Dynamite that AEW have ever done. The fallout was go watch Impact. That's what fans were told. They weren't told to watch AEW. They were told go watch Impact so you can find out the next chapter of this story. The fallout of Impact last night was go watch AEW to find the next chapter of this story. These shows now are following each other in telling the same story. And it would be strange at this point just to drop that off and go, okay, we're done, we're never going to talk about it again. It's too big. It's got too much buzz. It needs to continue, and I think that's what's going to happen. It feels pretty intertwined to me, and it feels like it could just be the beginning. Now, I've seen some people upset that it was just a pre-tape. There was quite a bit of stuff on social media beforehand going, wow, fans are going to be upset because it's just a 10-minute pre-tape or it's not live. Fans are going to be disappointed because it's just a 10-minute interview with Don Callis and Kenny Omega. Well, yes, of course that was what it was going to be. It never wasn't going to be that. It was always going to be that. What did you expect? Kenny Omega to come out in the Impact Zone with Pyro and with Don Callis and all this kind of stuff and then, I don't know, hit a V-trigger on Rich Swann? That was never going to happen. What do you expect? People are saying, oh, it was only a 10-minute promo, it wasn't live and it wasn't in the Impact Zone. It was never going to be. No, I don't think, unless I'm wrong, I never felt that was the case. I think everyone thought this was going to be a pre-tape. If anything, I felt some people probably thought it was going to be from somewhere in Jacksonville. They actually did their very best to make it appear like it was outside of Skyway Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. I give them credit for trying to do that. I give them credit for trying to make it feel like it was all in the same vicinity of the show. That, to me, is an attempt to make things feel a bit more intertwined. And they did their very best to give the impression that it was right outside the arena. They did their very best to edit it in the show. We know Impact Wrestling is pre-taped. We know the situation with that. What do people expect? Don Callis and Kenny Omega to spoil the whole storyline and have Jon Moxley attack them in the bus and all this kind of stuff. That was never going to happen. That was never going to happen. You know, they were going to reveal every single aspect of this storyline in 10 minutes at the end of Impact on AXS TV. Of course they would. Let it grow. enjoy the ride, because I think it's just the beginning here. I really do. I think it's just the beginning, and it's just the start of what is going to be a fascinating storyline going forward. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Kenny Omega's appearance last night on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chatting about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, NXT. We talk all pro wrestling here on the channel, so be sure to leave a comment, get involved in the community below. No opinions are right or wrong. We're just talking about our love of pro wrestling here on the channel. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'll do my best to respond and reply. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Easy for me to say. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.